call this area plan commission special meeting to order. First item would be just a roll call, members, please.
Jordan Brewer.
Here.
Grant Muller.
Here.
Clark Beard.
Here.
Walt Minnick is absent. Andy Bailey.
Here.
Mike Evans is absent. Dan Sheets.
Here.
Staff members Liz Stitzel and Kat Bell, and Board Attorney Jay Moore are also present.
Okay, we have one item which was continued from our regular meeting last week, and that is the planned unit development, also known as the PUD, for Prince Alexander for Good Oil, and it's in reference to the Banderas Point project. So I will have you take us through that staff report for this.
For sure. So just briefly before I delve into the staff report, first off, I'll apologize. It is a little bit lengthy. So if I'm confusing or something doesn't make sense, like don't be afraid to come back to it. You're not going to bother me. I recognize that this is a different kind of hearing than what we've seen before. Planned unit developments in concept, they're a zoning district, but they also include a primary development plan component where generally it's listed out what the buy-in is for what the development is going to be. Just like any other rezoning, it's going to start with a plan commission recommendation. And then in this case, because it's in the county, before it's the county commissioners. So the applicant is Prince Alexander, which is representing Good Oil. And the request is to rezone several parcels. They're a combination of currently zoned agricultural and B3, which is roadside business zoning district, to a planned unit development underlying zoning district. As noted, the surrounding land of these parcels are a combination of B3 and A1. There is a little bit of B4, which is general business, kind of to the east. So the site is located in the southeast corner of I-65 and West State Road 28 at the interchange. They're proposing to rezone this to a planned unit development to allow for a more comprehensive future development. Within this review on the PUD zoning process, we identified some areas the developer could not comply with State Road Overlay District standards and still successfully reach the vision for their project. The overlay district remains irregardless of the underlying zoning district, so you can't just write yourself out of it. So they did go to the Board of Zoning Appeals on March 16th of 2023 to get variances to allow the installation of gravel instead of paving, which is a variance from overlay standards in the primary and secondary tier that would require that everything be paved with curbs. And that specifically is to allow no curbs and gravel in parking and staging areas designed for livestock and on the individual RV parking pads. If any of those areas are within 700 foot of State Road 28 right-of-ways, then they must be fully screened from State Road 28 so that the spirit of the overlay doesn't change. Everything else in the planned unit development must be paved or returned to the BZA with specifics at a later point to get variances from the State Road 28 overlay. Just to be clear, the overlay district stands over top of both the current B4 and A1 districts, but also then the PUD, because those are underlying districts and you have an overlay. There's a series of maps just to try to help make this make a little bit more sense. The map on the first page shows you the existing zoning districts, which just a few there, with the A1 and the B3. On the second page is just blown up a little bit more, shows you the parcels that are involved, and specifically there are 3 parcels right within this area that are not involved, owned by, I believe the county commissioners have one for a water tower, there's a cell company that has one, another business or something that owns a site there at the front. Just because of the overlays interaction, there's a map here that shows you the primary and the secondary tiers of the overlay, and pretty much the entire planned unit development is within the overlay. On the third page, you've got a general map showing the proposed layout of planned unit development, and then there's just a picture from the road of what's there now. This would be commonly known as like the BP Good to Go gas station. I think we're all pretty familiar with it. It's been there a long time. So first, there's 5 criteria that the Plan Commission and the County Commissioners should pay reasonable regard to as you evaluate any zoning request, including a planned unit development. So first, the most recently adopted comprehensive plan. So the Washington Township future land use map in the 2012 comprehensive plan shows a great diversity of land uses. This specific area is designated for a mix of uses such as commercial office, agribusiness, entertainment. It's just a very mixed use area, potentially up against the interchange. Since sewer and water are completed all the way out to I-65 and 28 there at the interchange, then new approved uses and developments will be able to be adequately served in terms of wastewater disposal. Our plans had always said until there was sewer and water, we kind of were locking that area, and that's moved to the past at this point. This proposed rezoning to a planned unit development will provide greater design flexibility as the quadrant is built out, and can include uses and standards that are a combination of what's designated in the Unified Development Ordinance as belonging in totally different zoning districts, and have standards that differ from the Unified Development Ordinance, but help provide a result that's desired in a single development. The Clinton County Chamber of Commerce and County Commissioners Economic Development Plan, which is actually a separate document than the comprehensive plan that is not come through the Plan Commission, but has been separately done as a study. It calls for mixed use in this quadrant, including retail. So those plans are also relevant to current conditions and character of structures and uses in each district. So the conditions of the site right now are mostly agricultural, with some older fueling and trucking uses along State Road 28. The site has several parcels, most of them zoned roadside business, and 3 small parcels zoned agriculturally. The fueling station is currently working through a series of projects, moving everything back so they can install compliant West State Road 28 overlay berms, buffering, and plantings. Also some serious upgrades to the convenience store and canopies. The county commissioners have completed plans for and are working through the process of finding a contractor to construct a new roundabout that will be able to handle large volumes of traffic entering and exiting the interstate in front of this property. Once built, most access for the fueling station will move off of State Road 28 and onto the road that goes to the south out of the roundabout. Not mentioned in the staff report, but the roundabout's also designed to serve development of the interchange quadrant to the north. If the petition site were to be developed according to each individual parcel, each parcel would have to spot zone into the best district and then get individual special exceptions and variances for its proposed use and how it fits with what's around it. That would be a tremendous load on the BZA, and development would have to be piecemeal without regards to how the whole functions together. In a planned unit development district, the result should be an overall ordinance, development plan, and subdivisions with services and infrastructure planned out together and custom made, so the development envisioned can occur with minimal additional hearings once the Plan Commission and legislative body have granted their approvals, as long as that development stays within the constraints of the adopted PUD district in question. 3, the most desirable use for which the land in each district is adapted. So this land may well have been great farm ground if you only look at it from a soil type perspective, but the adjacent interstate access poses a strong argument that the highest and best use for the land is in fact commercial development and other uses that people drive to as a destination. Given that there is sewer and water in place, and all of the county plans, the comprehensive plan, the State Road 28 overlay plans, the economic development plans, encourage a wide range of commercial uses along this section of State Road 28, that would indicate the best use is likely to be in the general category of commercial and auto destination types. A high quality development with a central entertainment venue, retail, restaurant, hotel, fueling, camping, and other destination uses seems consistent with things that are desirable to traffic exiting the interstate. A planned unit development will keep a consistent, desirable look and feel project by project through the build out. For the conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction. So the surrounding uses currently are row cropping and business. The addition of sewer and water combined with the long-term community vision of development along State Road 28 is putting pressure on values. This is an area in flux where values are expected to continue to rise as interest to develop in the area, now that it has sufficient infrastructure, is beginning to increase. The Chamber and Commissioners are already receiving inquiries from companies that are interested in positioning themselves near this proposed development, and additional demand often has an increasing effect on values to a point. There are no immediately adjacent conforming residential uses or residential zoning districts that might potentially suffer negative value pressure from being close to a commercial development such as this PUD. 5, responsible growth and development. The proposed rezoning is adjacent to the interstate and all county plans. Again, the comprehensive plans, State Road 28 plans, and economic development plans anticipate significant growth in this area. A large roundabout is being constructed to handle the large volumes of traffic. The planned unit development includes a series of commitments to assure responsible development that enables rather than limits development around them. These include commitments to create covenants guaranteeing care of common infrastructure and space, ensuring access to non-owned parcels within the PUD, such as the cell tower and water tower, connecting everything into wastewater, incorporating pedestrian walkways, and providing access for a frontage road to exit their site to the east, allowing for the next parcel to also reach the roundabout and thus the interstate. With a planned unit development district in this quadrant and the encouragement of creative planning, it can provide greater flexibility, density, and variety in the type, design, and layout of sites and structures that will eliminate the challenges faced with developing multiple different uses on a particular parcel and eliminate the possibility of spot zoning and lack of cohesiveness. So that kind of concludes the section of general zoning analysis. And from a staff perspective, we didn't identify anything that we saw as not compliant with those 5 major goals. So now we move into specifically the planned unit development ordinance requirements. So this is where it starts to blur between the ordinance and the general development plan. And there's a list of items in Unified Development Ordinance 803 that need to be addressed in a general sense at this stage, the stage of primary approval. And then later on, when they come back for their secondary development plan, which was delegated only to the Plan Commission, those are then what they have to follow as they flush out the full detail. So the first item is the proposed layout of streets, sidewalk, open space, and other basic elements of the plan. So the road and utility master plan layouts do show most of the basic elements for streets. Open space is generally referred to on page 10, but it does lack quite a bit of detail on what open space is actually being dedicated to be permanent, which is required under 802.02C, versus what may be privately operated recreational facilities or other uses. In their plan, page 36 generally addresses walkways and commitment 4. Since no exclusion was proposed, page 12 of the proposed ordinance, and then 802.02 state that the Unified Development Ordinances for B4 apply. So basically what happens is if there's something in the ordinance for the planned unit development that turns out to be silent, it's not specified, then it defaults to the zoning ordinance as adopted for everybody for the B4 district. So it's not silent, it's not missing, it just falls back to that. The subdivision application will come to the Plan Commission subsequently instead of concurrently. So the applicant will commit and detail the specific layout of sidewalks at that point. But this PUD application with general details states on page 10 that the entire complex will be linked internally with a comprehensive system of sidewalks and multi-use trails. So something I did in this to try to help is I highlighted things in yellow where the staff has identified a challenge or an issue. So we kind of get to that, and this is, I referred to it briefly in the paragraph above, but open space is still lacking in general detail. The ordinance requires that 10% of the planned unit development be designated as permanent open space, more if added density is permitted, and that open space, since it's permanent, must have an entity to own and maintain it that's acceptable to the Plan Commission and the county commissioners. Since there's no park board in Clinton County, other options the ordinance recommends are a property owners association, another organization, or some combination thereof. In this particular case, there's some confusion because permanent open space may or may not be what they've designated as an open space district, which still appears to allow transfer of land and third-party uses. They've indicated in conversation that that entire open space district probably will be part of the required open space, but right now the ordinance doesn't say that. So that's flagged as something that needs to be clarified. Because right now there's not a clear plan for permanence or a clear indication of where and what the area might be and what percentage it makes up in the 100% that's all designated to other uses. Page 11 does indicate that some of this space may be cumulatively formed by individual developments, but that would then mean that private owners, not permanent space owned and maintained by a single responsibility or responsible party, are then handling an open space which would not qualify as required open space under the PUD ordinance. Additionally, permanent open space may not include required buffer yard areas, and the current draft does include them as part of the 10%. So we've highlighted that with the developer, and I think they do plan to try to address that, but there wasn't enough time before that meeting to get that revision back. It is possible some of the restored wetlands may help with that, but they're only mentioned as part of a campground in percentage. There's no plan for permanence or specific percentage that helps us identify that we do in fact have the 10%. So that's one area we've asked for a revision. There is some additional info that's found on page 21 in the newest draft of the ordinance. And it does indicate that the open space district may be that permanent open space and the developer will own and maintain it, but there's still no percentage. And staff would recommend that the developer use a mechanism of some sort to manage it, like an association or something else that would have fees and rules or some permanent framework, because if something happened to the developer or they sold it or otherwise were no longer involved, it does have to have permanence. It's also, again, unclear if the entire open space district will be in some sort of protective easement or only parts of that district where trails and green spaces are, in terms of how that's currently phrased. Item 2 is a general identification of location and types of structures and areas, their use categories in the area, and proposed densities of said uses. So page 14 through 18 in the proposed ordinance do show a zoning breakdown on a use table for where categories may locate that are different than what the underlying use table for the B4 would be. Page 10 further fleshes out a vision of the types of uses the development is envisioned to include. And then the master plan sheets do show some general densities and locations, and the additional submittals that was received and sent out yesterday include labels that generally detail the layout of planned unit development. 803.03 is proposals for handling traffic, parking, sewage disposal, drainage, tree preservation, removal, lighting, signage, waste disposal, and other pertinent development features. So much of this is indirectly addressed through the submittal, but there's some of it that's not clearly stated in the proposal or application. Page 10 with the revision does now note there are no trees on the acreage to preserve, so that's why there's no tree preservation plan. There were some additional submittals sent to the board yesterday that show parking and roads for traffic flow. There's still nothing in a clear written form that clarifies the vision for drainage or for waste, in particular trash and manure types of disposal and such. Well, I have had some informal conversations. I think they have a plan. It's just not detailed in the document yet. Page 36, Amendment 5 addresses sewage disposal. They will hook into the municipal sewers. The uniform signage plan is actually quite detailed. It starts on page 27 and details how their signage is all going to have one look and feel throughout the entire development. Lighting is addressed on pages 23 to 25. The observatory has reviewed the proposed changes to the lighting rules within the development and expressed their support of it as drafted. The next item is a map showing to scale the boundary line of the proposed district, all the land in the proposed PUD zoning. So there is a map showing the boundary of the PUD is towards the end of the submittal. When I first did the staff report, it was labeled primary plat. We had requested that labeling be changed because there is no concurrent subdivision hearing occurring, and that terminology is confusing. So they did on their April 9th submission, they have relabeled that exhibit site boundaries plan with proposed easements, which is exactly what it shows, and eliminates any possible confusion looking back between this stage of the review and the later subdivision stage that we'll have to come back through. 803.05 covenants to be part of the PUD. So the subdivision part of the PUD is going to be going under a separate application, so we don't have all the specific covenants in full detail yet, but they will have to be provided with that application. They are, however, generally addressed on page 36 of the submittal. Commitment 1, where they do make it clear that they will be creating covenants when they get to that stage of approval, since they're not combining it all in one hearing. 803.06 is a proposed schedule of construction and completion. So on page 10, there's a proposed schedule, but it was really, really general and didn't add a whole lot of clarity on major things that are developer responsibilities. There was a revision submitted that was sent out on 4/9, and it is better, but it still seems to lack specific dates, which are important because there's a 12-month timer if they're not staying on schedule or if they've abandoned work, at which time the PUD is then removed. And you don't just continue having this thing hanging out there for forever. It's designed as a mechanism for development, not as something that sort of sits out there. So we kind of need to know at what point we start that timer. And then there's some items missing, such as when they anticipate completing at least the first couple phases of their subdivisions and their secondary development plan approvals. They've indicated that they're going to start with build out for the campground and for the entertainment venues. So I would expect to kind of know when they anticipate the paperwork being finished and the reviews finished for at least those phases. Now, at some point, they've noted, and they're correct, it will be driven by the market in terms of their last phases across the retail areas. 803.07, an open space plan designating the type and location of open space to be provided and the manner in which the space will be perpetuated, maintained, and administrated. So without going over this in the same detail I did before, there is some detail on open space, but more is needed. And there's still some questions that we kind of went through under 803.01 about permanence and maintenance and those general plans in terms of what they anticipate creating. 803.08, locations of proposed easements, right-of-ways, and other restrictions imposed on land or buildings. So the third to last map, which was resubmitted with modified labels reflecting it's not a plat, it shows proposed easements and right-of-ways. There's no other restrictions that are shown or appear to be needed within our review. 803.09, landscaping, screening, and buffering proposals. So the development is not asked to remove itself from most of the external landscape screening and buffer requirements in the Unified Development Ordinance. Since this is within the State Road 28 overlay district, they will have to put berming along the front, and then there's some buffering around the outside. There are some specific things that they have modified. They're on page 22, where they're waiving buffer yards internally to the planned unit development between uses, which makes sense to allow for a more comprehensive single development. And then it also clarifies which internal districts have to place what buffers against which external districts, so we can figure out what has to be placed in each place as it develops out. And then the variance from the overlay district paving requirement is reflected on page 36, and there is an issue there in which the draft language as it sits now still doesn't quite match what was granted in the variance in terms of where it can be gravel versus where it cannot be. So that still needs a little bit of revision. Only limited areas in the proposed agritourism district of the planned unit development, specifically livestock parking near the event center and RV site pads in the campground, have the option of being gravel. And if they're within 700 foot, they must be screened from State Road 28. So the site plan layout also needs to match those variances. 803.10, minimum setbacks, lot areas, lot frontage, and lot width. That's addressed pretty thoroughly on pages 20 and 21 that detail that out in tables. 803.11, maximum height of principal and accessory structures and maximum permitted impervious surface per use type. So page 22 addresses maximum height in each district, and page 21 addresses maximum impervious surfaces. Any other, this is 803.10, which is the final one, any other specification within the planned unit development that will differ from the standards of the Unified Development Ordinance. There are some additional specifications that differ on pages 23, 25, and 27, and there's some added or modified zoning ordinance definitions on pages 37 through 42, and that relates to some specific uses and things that they want to be able to combine with standards. There's some additional staff analysis per Jay Moore. There's some edits that he requested to the draft ordinance. Staff did review these and requested some relevant changes before today's meeting. And I should note, sometimes we can pass things through with conditions, but because this is an ordinance, once it gets approved by the county commissioners, we can't just go back and change it without going through the whole rest of the process. So it does need to be right when it's adopted. It's not something that's easy to just modify without wasting a whole lot of time. So any changes that the applicant, the plan commissioner, the commissioners may desire need to be made before it reaches the commissioners for hearing. The majority of Jay's comments have been addressed in the revision with comments. It's not a complete final revision. It's kind of a comments version that was internal discourse. But there's still a few that Jay and the applicant are trying to resolve ahead of the hearing, and there was not available time either the applicant's side or Jay's side today to try to go through a multiple revision process. The second item is with regards to light manufacturing, which is a special exception in the business district. We did request an addition of added ordinance standards to limit it to incubators and small companies that are consistent with retail areas, since factories do not appear to be consistent with the vision for the development. On 4/9 of 23, a limit was added of 10,000 square foot in the definition, which is helpful. But we'd also kind of requested that a section in the 500s, it needs to be a number we don't currently use, with additional standards be added. They've indicated a willingness to do it, but just hadn't gotten to it before the hearing. And those would include standards such as them requiring to have a retail appearance on the outside and be consistent with the looks of the retail village where they'd be most likely to be located. And the final one was, as of the first time writing staff report, the county commissioners and the applicants were still working through the proposed commitments. But as of 4/8 of 23, the commissioners communicated that they are now on one page with the applicant. And they do not have any issues with the 7 commitments in the update that was reviewed on April 9th. As an additional procedure and process note, because it can be confusing, one of the potential advantages to a planned unit development district is being able to present and approve the zoning, the ordinance, the subdivision, and the development plan all simultaneously. But the applicant for this planned unit development has chosen to separate the approvals into a series of hearings and approvals, all of which must be complete before the planned unit development can actually begin building commercial structures or selling lots. So in this case, we're currently in this first step, which is hearing the zoning ordinance, and the general plan concept for the development, that primary development plan as specified. If it's approved, then it will move on to a secondary approval of a specific detailed development plan, which is delegated to the Plan Commission. And it can be phased in sections throughout the development. Then they'll have to bring a subdivision plat that meets the subdivision ordinance, the PUD ordinance, the UDO where the PUD is silent, and all commitments adopted by the county commissioners. Again, that can be phased. Then improvements have to be installed or bonded before their secondary plat is submitted for administrative approval. That also can be phased. So what's often happens with large developments is once they get through their initial, this one is in their separated schedule, they're looking at focusing on their entertainment venue first. So I'd anticipate we'll probably get a phase, through there, and then they'll move to their campgrounds. No construction of any kind can occur until after the secondary development plan is heard and approved, and no lots can be sold or building constructed until after a secondary subdivision plat for the phase is recorded. So I guess the important note there is, in our hearings and approvals at this initial step, there's not ground turning tomorrow. It's the beginning of a process, but this is really important because everything that happens going forward will fall within the framework of the ordinance that's adopted for the PUD and that the county commissioners buy into as a vision. So in summary, I'm not going to read it verbatim because I just went through it step by step, but there's a series of items that were highlighted in yellow that I noted that the applicant has been asked to provide. Some of them they've gotten back to us, but particularly with respect to open space, drainage, waste disposal, the construction and completion plan, and matching the variance, and a few things with J. There's some items that still need to be finished up. The applicant has agreed to amend the proposal and add the clarification on things that are needed. There just was not time in today with the long weekend to get that back and forth. So we didn't make any further changes to the staff report since this was released yesterday. So as things stand now with what's been reviewed, staff would recommend to go ahead and make sure there's no interested parties or other relevant issues, but continue the application. We would recommend to the next regular meeting, not generating another special meeting, and letting the applicant know they've got to finish meeting the last requirements for the PUD ordinance. And then we would, of course, review and issue communication between now and then as that came in. But from staff's perspective, we have a concern that any recommendation to the county commissioners, regardless of if it's positive, negative, or neutral, should be complete and ready for adoption as an ordinance. And the general concept for the development plan should also be complete and accurate, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to administrate it afterwards, and the commissioners, to amend what we send to them, will have to send it back to us. So it just generates more time. So I apologize for the length of that. I'm happy to go look at specific pages if there's something we need to focus on, but I don't want to go on for, ridiculously more. So hopefully that gives you a high level view for a place to start. And I'm happy to help organize additional questions as you move forward through it.
Okay, thank you, Liz. I know the petitioner's here. Would you like to, that was a lot for us to digest. So do you want to present something or?
Yes, certainly, if you don't mind. My name's Steve Alexander with Prince Alexander Architects. I feel like this is really our first chance to actually present what we're doing with some specificity and detail. I appreciate Liz's homework and assistance of planning staff and attorney helping us get this far. We've been working on this PUD ordinance for almost a year. So although there's still a couple of things hanging out here, we've made enormous strides over that period. With that being said, I'd like to introduce Don Good, Wyatt Good, and Dean Good from Good Oil. And they're the sponsors, developers of the project, and have been very active in acquiring the property. So although we've looked at these maps a lot, we haven't, like I say, really talked about what they're showing and what they mean exactly in a public setting. I don't know how the best way is to kind of share all that.
Fine right here. Yeah.
You can all see it.
Yeah.
So this is a 64-acre parcel. This is 28, and this is 65. And what I've done in this particular drawing is highlight the business units as compared to the overall plan, because the PUD zoning applies to the entire 64 acres, but the multiple projects and sort of there's semantic issues about what is a subdivision and what is open space, I think is what we're trying to clarify. And I think Liz is really helping. We got that figured out here in the last couple of days. But the color, the highlighted colors on this map show what I would call the intended final users of the parcels. So this is the convenience store located here, and there you can see there's a pole barn over here and kind of a gravel area here. This is the water tower, and this is the cell tower here. So what we're showing, the wetland area that's here, and this, they're undesignated wetland according to DNR, but they still are functional wetlands. And so we're taking the opportunity to make those a landscape feature and actually function as a stormwater detention basin. So on our maps where we designate that as the OS district, the open space district, what we've been really kind of sorting out is who owns that in the end and who takes care of it. So this is the equestrian center and event center here along the highway, and the main building is a fairly tall steel structure that ends up being 30 feet at the eaves in the main arena. We wanted that to be a high visibility project from the interstate so that it acts as a billboard for the activities that are going on in this intersection. Along with the water tower and the cell tower and the other signage kind of sticking up out of the prairie, if you will, we really wanted to draw attention and make the most of the visibility of that, because we see this project, the entire project, functioning a lot like the Fair Oaks Farms project up in Rensselaer, which you see from the interstate, and clearly understand that that's a expo center for the agribusiness industry and agritourism. And so it's really important. I know one of the things that we are blessed with, that you being on the planning commission, is the technicalities of planning and the wording of the ordinances and everything. And how do we make all of this possible through zoning? And when the current zoning doesn't allow us to make those kind of statements, like how do we make this a high visibility project from the interstate? How do we make this a billboard for Clinton County? And so by using the PUD ordinance, we can refashion the zoning and make the most of how to do those things. So in this case, when we start out, well, we start with like things like how do we circulate traffic through the site? If we're bringing in a lot of livestock trailers into this expo center, we don't want them to come in here and have to parallel park. We want them to come in and circulate through the building. So we started out with how do we get livestock trailers and semi-tractor trailers to circulate through this site Similarly, fire trucks or other life safety vehicles that need to come in. So each of the projects is designed as a functional unit in itself, so that if a fire truck actually, this is a good example down here. One of the things that came out in our planning process was that if people coming in with livestock trailers, horse trailers with campers, they want to be able to pull right into the campground. So we have a horseman's camp area with extra large campsites here so that they can get into that. So it's thinking about how does someone circulate into that campground. But again, that's a thing, a real benefit of the PUD ordinance, that we can be creative with the applications about how things work between the sites. Although the real entrance location for the RV campgrounds here, this whole shaded area here is the area indicated for the RV campground. So the main entrance is here, but to expect someone with a livestock trailer to come all the way down here and then drive all the way back around and drive out to come here to end up coming all the way back down here, that doesn't comply with logic. It might comply with the ordinance, but we're trying to take advantage of the PUD ordinance to make this thing logical, so the visitors that are coming to Clinton County and taking advantage of the equestrian center, the expo center, have the best experience they can. So largely with the RV campground being here, we've designed a winery, another feature, agribusiness feature that can go here, then a retail village and a hotel. So the actual public infrastructure, if you will, is really limited to the road that's part of the roundabout, and then this public area here and the public right-of-way that we're committed to an extension of 800. So it might be, in another world, we might have had to consider making this a public road all the way around here. That would have been really complicated and expensive to do. However, what this drawing does show is the utility design. You can see these dark lines where there's multiple lines through here. So there is a utility loop that is part of that project. So although the power is going to be on this side, the water and sewer is going to be on this side of the building in a public easement, mutually beneficial easement to all the parcels. So that's when we got into the issue about who owns and maintains the open space. And it occurred to us this last week after we received the staff review that really the largest parcel that has the largest site maintenance to do is the RV campground. And most logically, the stormwater area should be under the maintenance of the RV campground. So we're going to create a mutually beneficial easement that holds this, that's beneficial to all of the parcels so that all of the stormwater goes in there, but it will be maintained by the RV campground parcel. So when we see open space and public open spaces like what we're calling the town square on the plan here, is really a more beneficial roundabout, if you will. We thought if semi-tractors end up coming down into here and they go, oh man, I shouldn't have come down here, they got a place to turn around here without trying to do a three-point turn. Same with the Class A RVs, you know, there can be up to 60 or 70 feet long. So we wanted to create an internal roundabout so that traffic flow on the site can anticipate whatever vehicle should enter that. But it also establishes really that natural connection and turn lane into the 800 extension. So although we have some detail points in the ordinance that we are working on, and we completely agree with the need to clarify those items. We want to make sure you kind of see the deeper planning that has gone into this in the last year. Aside from the technical compliance, is the logical compliance of the users in the site and having dozens, if not hundreds, of large vehicles coming into the property. What that translates into is a color version of that so you can see a little better. This is more render. So in the event center, the equestrian center, the expo center, the paved parking areas here and the outdoor arenas for riding events or other livestock events are here. And then the deeper part of the wetland area where we have will remain water at all times is designed to really, in a maximum storm event, to flood completely so that the water is all contained in the wetland area and doesn't get into other areas. This is the proposed convenience store size, and you can see this is the diesel canopy that's recently been constructed here, and this shows the new roundabout. That the extent of that construction will go all the way down to the expo center site. So that you can see more clearly here to what we call the town squares, where the sort of historical roundabout, kind of an old-timey kind of roundabout would be here. And that also leads into the retail village and the hotel and the other retail in that area. So you can see in that, and in this particular rendering is a little more of a 3D view of that. So we know everybody's got a little bit different perspective on how you see that, but again, you can see this is the roundabout here. This is the new convenience store. This is the expo center and the parking, and there's the stormwater detention area and the hotel and retail village. So the RV campground wraps around there. So there's many places where open space is indicated on the plans, but as Liz said, we haven't actually drawn a line around and designated that and clarified what that is. And so our objective is to get that cleaned up pronto and get it going forward. As a petitioner, we don't have any objection to any of the things that we've talked about. We see them over the last year's work as some of the final technical details to get it clarified, and feel like those can be cleaned up pretty quickly, and would respectfully request conditional approval on that, and have administrative review rather than a continuance, so that can take more of your time on that. And I'll do respect, we appreciate the special meeting, but everybody's got things to do. So we'd like for the commissioners to consider that, so it'd be cleaned up well in advance of the county commissioners meeting, so that they would be all the documents would be in compliance at that time.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up for anyone else. I see we have a few other people here. If there's anyone want to comment to the board, questions or concerns? Okay, I'll open it up to board discussion. Thoughts?
Looking at it, I think this is a great concept. I love the fact that they're able to use that wetland and hopefully can use it the way they're intending to. I think that would be a great thing. The other thing that was a concern to me that has been addressed here through the commissioner's comments is making sure we don't build that roundabout that just serves one location. That's the extension of 800. I think that's very important to have that included here. One thing I would like for staff to do is reach out to Frankfort Emergency Services, particularly the fire department. They're going to be the ones taking this over. When we do reviews in the city, as you know, we get together on a project like this. All the utility companies will come in, fire department, EMS, everybody comes in, looks at the overall concept. But since Frankfort will be servicing this, I would like at least for the fire department to take a good look at this.
Mm-hmm. I was saying, I passed on some comment to them that they are going to try here in the next week to get something together that's a little more summarized than the full ordinance for me to send on to a Frankfort Fire and Frankfort
Now, they don't need
Police.
to down in the details, but particularly I know one thing they look at is fire hydrant location, things like that.
And service of water lines and road widths.
Mhm. Exactly.
Are the current plans detailed down to where all those are
Not what we've received,
Visible.
but in fairness, they're only required at this stage to have a general concept. And then those get laid out specifically in their secondary development plan and their planning. That said, I certainly think it's relevant if there's a specific concern that Frankfurt Fire, Frankfurt Police have, that either be added as a commitment or be included in their overall development plan generalities, stating what it is they're going to do to address whatever that concern is. So then we know when we get to that later stage, what it is we're looking for in specifics at that point.
Okay.
I've got a question. So the overlay district still is the rule, they have to follow the overlay district. Does our overlay district restrict confined feeding?
So yes, confined feeding in the overlay district is one of the prohibited uses, so they cannot have permanent barns where livestock are being permanently housed in the primary tier. The secondary tier does not forbid it. So the back half of the site, they can have horse barns. That's something that we discussed. That's part of why your Horseman's Campground is pushed to the rear of the site, because there cannot be animals continuously stabled in the primary tier. It's a prohibited use. But there is no such ban in the secondary tier. So the back half, if you look at the staff report on the second page, you can kind of see where the line between the blue and the green is.
Yeah.
Everything that's green does not have any prohibition. All that would affect them is the typical setback. So depending on the number of head, this is large, quarter mile from a house. If it's under 50 animal units, then they're going to be 660. But there's no prohibition on the use.
Okay, cool. That was one of my concerns is when I looked through the land use matrices, that was the one glaring one on the overlay district that came to mind for me. So,
I appreciate you reviewing it, and it's a good catch. It was one of the first things a year ago when we started talking that I highlighted, because originally they wanted those stables toward the front, and we were like, wait, this just won't work, so not unless we do some kind of major ordinance amendment. But historically, we've had some other applications for confined feeding areas, particularly for horses, in the primary tier of the overlay, and those have been denied as requests, with the general idea that, this is a little bit different in a PUD, but that a confinement facility is not the highest and best use for land right up against the interstate itself. So they're aware and have modified their plans, and I appreciate you looked and read through it.
that was my one catch that I had. Other than that, I'm good.
Any other questions?
No, I'm good. The fire kind of came to my mind too, but then Dan answered that for me, so.
I guess I would like to throw out a question. The staff recommended to continue, and the applicant recommended that we grant conditional approval with everything being handled administratively. I guess, are there any negatives to granting the applicant's request? What's the downside of turning this all over to just, administrative, which I would assume would be Liz and Jay and Kat and the developer? Is there a downside to that?
I think maybe there is at this point. This is the first time we've really done it. And, for this is going forward very quickly. Not on I'm sure they've been working a long time on it, but from our standpoint, it's going forward very quickly. And compared to other jurisdictions, it's going forward at light speed.
Well, we've always prided
and we've always
ourselves
prided ourselves in that.
on
But
moving things forward, yeah.
I think there are questions that need to be considered by the board, you guys, and ultimately the commissioners. In other words, what does open space mean? How much infrastructure, in other words, does open space mean tennis courts, or does it mean They have tennis courts, they have go-kart tracks allowed in open space, and I'm,
Do we have flexibility on the percent of the open space?
This percentage, no, although you can increase it. So your open space, you have to have a minimum of 10% of the proposed development district designated as permanent open space. This is from 802.02C. And it says if the planned unit development is decreasing lot sizes and setbacks and impervious surface and other standards, then additional open space shall be designated in exchange for increased intensity. So there is actually a clause that allows the planning commission and the commissioners to go, wait, this is getting more intense. We want to shift it a little bit. And then it says open space shall be usable, permanently maintained, and may consist of natural areas, lawn and garden plots, recreational areas, greenways, trails, and common agricultural uses shared by the residents. So to Jay's point, the question the board would examine there is a tennis court a recreational area or is it something else?
and do all recreational areas count as open space?
Which I would say no, not unless they've been designated as permanent, and that was kind of what we talked about, there's just some specificity lacking in their written plan, although I think their intent is not out of line. It's just not there. I think from a staff perspective, my concern is, again, it's the first budget we've done, and I'm basically being asked then to single-handedly draft the final form of an ordinance to send to the county commissioners without a final look from the plan commission, trusting that I got it visioned right and not to undersell, but Jay may have some merit in saying this is something that has weight. Not that I don't believe myself to be capable or wouldn't do my best, but you're going to be looking at adopting a series of things to be done, some of which are not entirely clear where you want us to land on them, such as exactly, questions that aren't there. What format is the permanent maintenance of the open space taking? If it's simply delegated, then I have everything in the ordinance, which is extremely broad, but the ordinance doesn't say that I have the power to make that decision by myself. So I don't know, I think there's some questions. As staff, I respect the board, whichever way they go, and I certainly respect the applicant in making their request, as they're moving forward.
Absolutely.
I don't at all judge the request, but I do have misgivings that if something doesn't end up correct, A, we could open ourselves to a legal review that we might not pass if I did something that administratively I wasn't supposed to do. And B, as Jay said, there's some things that merit the board determining that, yes, this meets the PUD ordinance and this has the general concepts necessary, and we're passing on something complete to the commissioners, and we're not going to get into this thing where the commissioners discover something wrong, then they have to revise it and send it back, and now we send it back again, and we've got these 60 and 90-day timelines. It would be better to make sure it's right.
Another just sort of example of some of the issues that we have to sort of sort through is they have impervious surface ratios as being permitted at a rate that far exceeds what we allow under our ordinance, under our general ordinances. It also takes away from the Area Plan Commission the review of impervious surface ratio and puts it in Dan's lap.
Actually, they eliminated that in terms of determining impervious. You had made a comment about,
It's still in there.
oh, the impervious surface ratios are, but the exclusion for drainage they took out.
Well, but it says the determination of the drainage plan establishes the permitted impervious surface ratio.
They deleted it. You crossed it out and they deleted it.
No, I think it's still
Let
there.
me find it.
I'm pretty sure we took that out.
Yeah, I'm 100% sure you did, because when I went through it, I noted it. So there's no redefinition of impervious surface. If they exceed what their ordinance says, then they would have to come for variance, same as the drainage board can't give a de facto. I just gotta find the appropriate page where
Well,
your
this-
note was.
I mean, these are all over our ratios.
Right here. So page 20, you crossed out unless otherwise approved in writing by the county drainage board. And you find it over here. I think
But
the
it
page
says
is shifted.
impervious areas on lots that conform to the provisions of the approved master drainage plan shall be considered compliant with the impervious surface area limits.
Are you looking at the same version?
Yes, I am.
Let me find
I think your point is noted though.
Yeah, no, it's fair that there shouldn't be.
I would,
Oh, I see what you're talking about, the paragraph above, not where you crossed it out.
Yeah,
Um,
that's still there.
so that would be the question that the plan commission would have to govern on.
while we're on this topic, it's a perfect timing, because I'd like to request that if anything, the staff report or these documents get further revisions, we've got to do a red line. I don't want to have to sit down and reread it.
Yes, I agree.
I can ask the applicant to, once they, right now, I just provided this because they didn't have a final version ready for tonight. It was with comments, and I wanted you guys to see something that matched the staff report revisions.
Today I was looking at the second version and freaking out, going, that took forever. to
Yeah.
read first.
We can ask them, if we're continued and we're working through getting that final up, we can ask them to redline anything remaining that between JI and them is
Yeah.
changed, so that the board can scan through it and whatever final draft gets sent on to you. If you choose to adopt it with a list, then, I mean, that's a different problem that we'll just have to work through.
Well, I'm in favor of staying on board, supporting you, and just continuing this. If it doesn't create any undue hardships for the applicant or any
It's
of
a
the.
question you'd have to ask them.
Steve?
In all due respect, I hear what Liz and Jay are saying. However, if we were proposing an industrial park, I want to go back to, although it seems like a long time, or a short time, that we're requesting, I think the county's been working on planning this intersection for maybe 10 years. The planning, the utility extensions to promote development out there probably took a couple of years. Getting the money for it took time. We're, working within the planning of the county to promote development of that intersection. And the level of detail, granted, that we've been working through over the last year, there's a lot of detail. However, in this particular instance, we're not proposing a high-density industrial park or covering this with apartments or a shopping center that's got 100 outlots. The majority of it is open space. The RV campground from October to May will be an open park-like environment with no structures essentially except for the clubhouse and maybe a shower. So I recognize staff's perspective about the speed with which we're moving, but I do think, and I think the Planning Commission has a great deal of trust in staff's ability to work out these details. So we will agree with whatever the commission passes, but I'd like to just push, to keep the wheels turning as reasonably quickly as we can.
Well, I've been on either the BZA or the Area Plan Commission since 2008. I've only heard of that. Okay, so from that standpoint, it is new territory for all of us. But I do take pride in the fact that we've got some of the best staff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially for the size of our community. And I don't want to hold things up. I don't want to go to a bunch of unnecessary meetings, but I don't want to make my constituents think like I'm being lazy and not wanting to do this. So I'm just trying to figure out, we've got our attorney and our executive director saying one thing.
Yeah, I think, so I looked at the calendar, here would be the time frame, just for reference. It would be, the next area plan meeting is May 2nd, and then the commissioner meeting would be May 15th.
Although I would note, as a side note to the commissioners, it's happened before, but you could choose to meet sooner than that if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Something was being passed up.
Regular meetings.
Sure.
Those are the
We
days.
don't want to overburden. I mean, Grant, like I say, we're all busy too. So if that's the pleasure of the commissioners, we will abide by that.
how much, go ahead, Dave.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to do that. I do follow on the staff side with this. I know she's dealing with a lot of personal issues right now. It's very much on her mind, and this is a very difficult project from our standpoint, being the first one we've done. And I would like to give her time and on her request to move this to the May meeting and then with the commissioners at that point.
Now, I'm willing to do all my homework and get to the meetings and do what needs to be done. You know, meeting schedule special if you have to.
We can stick with originally scheduled meetings of May 2nd and May 15th.
It's not gonna throw off your guys' timeline too significant. I mean, I think we have more, we could move to the May 2nd for the area plan.
Yeah.
We have a little more flexibility at the commissioner level. I could probably get that organized if we needed to do that,
Agreed.
to work in your time frame if the 15th doesn't, so. They could be open to those ideas.
Good with that either.
Gentlemen, I hate to do this, but my client, the town of Kirkland I'm there now.
Okay.
So I need to take off if that's okay. It sounds to me like we're gonna continue this.
Yeah, thank you, Jay.
Thanks.
Yeah, because that should give it, I mean, if I wrote it down correctly, that I think there was five issues to clean up.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
2 of those are open space
Right.
related,
And
so.
then the J's changes is, I mean, I think it incorporates about 10 remaining items, but some of them may actually resolve, they're just, Jay
I
didn't have
think the
time
biggest
today to
issue
kind
is
of.
is
the
working
open
through
space.
the open space.
I think
Okay.
so.
All right,
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
so it sounds like you're willing to accept that,
Yeah.
and we'll work with you on the back end. If we can get the May
Appreciate
2nd, have it cleaned up, you can go through the process and hopefully the approval, and then I'll be able to work with you guys on if we need to do a special meeting to get the commissioner part done, so.
Yep.
Well, I'll make a motion to, do we continue or do not?
I believe.
Table it. Continue
You
or-
do not table, you continue, but hang
Continue.
on, you may actually need to waive your rules first. I think there may be only, is there, am I remembering correctly? I'll know in 2 seconds, I'll pull your rules up.
It's been a good question for our attorney.
It would have been a great question. I know off the top of his head, I'll get there. It may be different for the BZA and the APC. The commission has at its discretion may continue or postpone the hearing of any case on the affirmative vote of the majority of the members present. The petitioner may request a continuance or postponement of their agenda item at any time prior to the call for a vote by the president of the plan commission. A postponement or continuance may be granted at the discretion of the commission until the next regularly scheduled plan commission meeting. Yada, yada, yada. Then at that meeting, they shall act upon the petition. Oh, there may be the rub. At the next plan commission meeting, the commission shall act upon the petition, or the petitioner will be required to withdraw and comply with other applicable ordinance requirements. So yes, I would say you do need to waive your rules with regards to that to be able to continue a second time. When you waive the rules, you do have to have a majority of your membership that votes together, not just a majority of those present. So you're a 7-member board. 4 people have to vote together in order to waive rules.
Motion to waive the rules for having more than one continuance.
Without withdrawal already.
Second. Motion, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, 5.
Then I'll make a motion to continue it to the May 2nd meeting.
Second.
Second. Do roll call for this one.
Dan was my second.
Yes.
Jordan Brewer,
Yes.
Grant Muller,
Yes.
Clark Fair,
Yes.
Andy Bailey,
Yes.
and Dan Sheets.
Yes.
Okay, continue to May 2nd.
Thank you.
I think that gives us enough time to get it.
And thank you for your patience
Yeah,
with us.
appreciate it.
We're We're learning through all of this.
Understood. So am I'm telling you. I sell Snickers for 11.
She knows, she knows, man, she knows.
So, all right, I think that was our only item of business, so with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I hear a lot of motion over there.
Jesus.
Okay, Andy and Grant.
Yes, put a
Okay.
motion.
Absolutely.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rose.
Thanks, Rob.
Appreciate it.
Going good.
Okay.
No. Oh, yeah.